Welcome, everyone, on the Wednesday morning series. Dr. David is joining. Today, we flip flop weeks, and so he's here this week, and next week, people will see Scott and I. We just flip flop those weeks. So we do the shuffle sometimes. So, and Dr. David and I were catching up briefly, and he was like, I have a little topic today, but not, and I was like, they're all important topics. This is, challenging work, and this is, he's got a wealth of information. Among his other creations is Sex Under the Influence and a new workbook, about that as well. So anyway, so what do you have for us today, Dr. David? We're so thrilled to see you.
Yeah, thanks, Tammy. It's always good to be here. And I'm going to also do a little bit of a shameless plug. The new workbook I have is out.
Yes.
It's
Less Men and Meth. Yes.
my first book was Less Men Myth 10 years ago, and it needed a little bit of a refresher because things have changed a little bit. So I
A little
did
bit. Oh
this
my goodness. In this world.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought chemsex would be in the rearview mirror by this point,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's only worse.
Yeah.
But anyway, this takes that, it updates it, and then I collaborate with somebody who is really good at writing workbooks and study guides and journaling things. So it's a way to kind of interpret the information, which I
Oh,
think is
great.
really just a constant need is what I've seen over the years. Is just people uh, find this information intriguing and interesting and relevant, but they're not quite sure what to do with it. And so this helps people kind of guide, especially if they're not in therapy or in treatment. It's a helpful thing. This book also can be useful for therapists too. So it should be really good. But in the course of doing this, and this maybe is a kickoff, been really interested to sort of realize that both the addiction and a lot of the dynamics that partners go through, it's really kind of a backhanded way of trying to self-regulate, right?
Mm,
There's a lot of
hmm
chaos, a lot of feelings, a lot of concern, anxiety, fear, and a lot of times these addictive behaviors, and it's kind of counterintuitive because sex and porn addiction and certainly drug use and sex create a lot of chaos. But
hmm
in a way, the chaos is a bit of the solution,
hmm
weirdly. It's counterintuitive, but it's sort of it distracts the nervous system and it kind of provides an avenue to kind of pour that energy into. It doesn't take us anywhere. It's anywhere good anyway, but it's in a weird way, it's kind of a solution. And bottom line, what I'm saying here is that I think we can't just, it's not just enough to have the information of saying, okay, this is what your addiction is. This is what it looks like. This is all the kind of science around it and what's happening in the brain and all that's really important. But unless people have a new way of being, a new way of taking care of themselves, it's not going to work. And because I think a lot of times our addictions, including an addiction to another person, sometimes, if you put it that way, really is a coping mechanism. It's a way of dealing with stuff, and we can't just take it away without replacing it with healthier patterns. So I think that it's just a reminder that, like in the first step, right, that's giving up the substance or the behavior is just the beginning, right? All the work really follows from that. And I think a lot of times, at least in the beginning, clients assume, okay, I quit, that's it, that's the work. And that's really just the starting point, um, which is uh, can be kind of horrifying, I think, but it also is a huge opportunity. When people realize, oh my God, this can be a new way of living in a way that I've never done before. And I think a lot of times, especially as you know, I deal a lot of with the sex and drug piece when they're fused. And a lot of times people, as it's true with sex and porn addicts too, their sex and intimacy lives are kind of a mess, right? They're a wreck, and for good reason. But I think a lot of times people think, well, this is all due to the addiction, and part of it certainly is due to the addiction. But what the point I want to make is that a lot of times behaviors and thought patterns and concerns and trauma and all kinds of things existed long before we ever picked up a drug or a behavior. Right. And so, yeah, we have to clean up the wreckage of the addiction itself, but we also have to go back and really learn new ways of living, skills, learning how to regulate, learning how to, not worry, dive into anxiety, all the sort of bad habits that we as human beings acquire. So uh, it's just, I think, a good reminder for me, and I try to partake of this with my clients too, is just to slow it down. These are skill, it's a lot of skills, a lot of practice, a lot of falling down and picking ourselves back up, um, and just moving forward. But I think there's no magic fix here. The message, and I've seen this now, been doing this a lot of work like you have for many years. People do get better if they do the right things, right? I think there's so much hopelessness around these behaviors sometimes. And a lot of that is, we've talked about, is chemical in the brain, right? These behaviors overstimulate certain parts of the brain, so it just kind of exhausts them. And after a while of living in that high impact chaos, it's really hard to feel anything pleasant. And that does come back. But I think a lot of times people in early recovery think, ugh, if this is what it's about, I don't want it because everything seems kind of flat. And that's, of course, not how it will be forever. But yeah, just patience and support and community, right? I think that's the other thing, the beauty of a place like Seeking Integrity. I think, boy, I was struck when you said $1,300 of content. I believe it. That's a wonderful resource for people. So that information, and what we've done, I think, in building communities online, because people with these addictions are so dispersed. It may be hard to find somebody in your local town that has the same experience, but we can sure find them online. So just finding the resources, staying connected, that's really where it goes for me. And hopefully this
I,
workbook and other books will help.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think workbooks, books, they're all helpful, but just like you said, it's multifaceted. There's no, like I love our work groups. Those are psychoeducation. Many therapists recommend those, and there's a number of them, including Sex Addiction 101 or the betrayed partner one starts today. But those are not enough. Like that is one snip at a time. You mentioned the addiction is the problem. That's the perception of like, if this person just stops those behaviors, I used an S, then everything's going to be okay. And what you're talking about with the chaos and everything, the there's I often say, the acting out is a symptom, of the deeper
Yes.
problems. You got to stop this before you start delving into this. But the chaos, I remember, I mean, my life was chaos. I don't tolerate it well now, but that was what I lived in. And so it is, such a disruption, of like, my life is calming down. So yes, it feels boring, but it was also challenging not to go create more chaos in, even without acting out, I can create chaos, it is hard. And I think it can be a hard
Yeah.
sell to go, oh, you'll have this other life and it'll be better and all of this. When someone's hanging on desperately to this is what I know, and it can be terrifying to let go, of this, hoping that you're telling the truth about, some of the other things. So the challenge of, of making a decision and then committing to it and leaning into the resources and understanding, yes, it will take time. Again, addicts are, speaking from experience and lots of, but I want the instant, like, I've shared this before, like, B vitamins are supposed to help you with energy. I take a B vitamin and my brain still goes to, I should feel energy. And that's not what it is. It's,
Yeah.
but that's how my brain thinks after all of these years. So I remind myself, no, it's a cumulative effect and blah, 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 but you're not going to get a rush like you do with substances that, that change things instantly. So it's that thinking. And for partners, while I don't believe people can be addicted to other people. They can be hyper focused on, someone else, for, but, like hoping, from a partner standpoint, it can be, gosh, I care about this person so deeply. I want this relationship, so badly. And I see them self-destructing and that ruins our relationship. And what about me? The fear of like, I could be alone or like all of those things, so the hyper focus on, well, if I can just get this person to stop doing those things, then everything's going to be fine. And it isn't instantly. It can start to get better pretty quickly, and you'll see changes, particularly for those that are willing to do the work, to change course. In 12 in my 12 step meetings, there's a couple of people who often use the gift of desperation, and we use that language. Anybody outside of 12 steps is going to go, what? But in yet, like, until and unless we're desperate enough, and that window is little, like it's just getting cracked open, and so if we are willing to push the rest of the window up and walk through, we can have a really good life. And again, like I was sharing earlier, there are people who choose not to do so, to their own detriment, the relationship, everything else. So
I think we've both been there, of course, where, well, in my own case, I was kind of stuck in my addiction, right? And it didn't work anymore as they don't. It stops working to, I wanted to more numb than anything else in my own case. But it wasn't working. But I was afraid to do anything else because even though I was in tremendous pain, it was kind of a familiar pain. And the unknown, that fear of unknown, until it just got so bad, it's like, okay, whatever. Take me, I'm ready. And I think that's that window you're talking about. And with addicts, at least, I mean, as and you accurately stated, that window can close so fast. And that usually happens at the end of an addiction cycle with sex and porn addicts, at least, where I'll say, oh my God, I did it again. I feel miserable. I feel awful. And then that kind of fades away after a while, right? And the window closes. So grabbing onto that moment, whenever it occurs, is really huge. And to remind ourselves when we're no longer feeling it, but we can remember, yeah, I know I'm going to feel better in a week and probably try to convince myself it's not so bad, but maybe I can remember this particularly painful moment and really grab onto that and create an anchor to remember if I start trying to fool myself again.
And that has been my journey, like with I still go to 12-step meetings. I still have people that come in that are brand new, and you go, thank you for the reminder that, yeah, it's still not good out there. But I think denial is such a powerful thing, and the fear of the unknown, like you said, that I this is a whole unknown, and that sounds scary, and boring. Like if you're telling me, oh, you're gonna have a good life and you're gonna really care about your relationships and all this kind of stuff, and you're telling me that I have to give up my intensity, like this is the thing, or things that have, like, this has been the one constant that has been my
Exactly.
go-to. And like, why would I want to give that up, unless I have to? For me, and you I didn't know another way. Like, I really was not in any information where it was like, oh, there is another way. And so I did not know how until things got desperate enough, and off to treatment I went. And then they told me there was another way. And I believed them. I wanted desperately enough to have, I mean, I knew I was killing myself, but it was one of those where I didn't know how to stop. But they told me
Exactly.
there is another way, and if you do these things. And I believed enough and was willing to lean into that, and it's served me really well for a long time. But I have also seen, I mean, I know so many people who have not chosen that path. So it's always like, I want everybody to get this, you know
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
throw a lifeline out, but not everybody chooses it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
questions from the group. We'd love to have some questions. So the workbook is available now. I mean, you have a hard
It
copy of
is.
it, so it's available.
As of January 20th, it was available on Amazon as both an ebook and a workbook. Um,
Great.
so yeah, I'm really pleased with it. And we're gonna have our debut in London on March
Oh,
7th. I'm going to be at the European Chemsex Summit, which is a big deal.
yeah.
And especially a big deal because Europe has done a lot of work on chemsex, much more than we have in this country. And by chemsex, I mean sexualized drug use, this combination of drugs and sex, obviously. So to kind of include Americans. There's two of us that are part of the conference. So, but it's linking up work we do here, and we do good work here. And a lot of it is based actually on the work that of kind of pioneers in sex and porn addiction, which is really that treatment that we've perfected over 20 years or so has really contributed to how we understand chemsex and what we can do about it. Because traditional substance abuse treatment just doesn't work for this. It's in fact, a lot of substance abuse, as we've talked about here, my gripe is that substance abuse treatment centers will just kind of ignore the sex piece. And a good number of their clients are also addicted to sex and porn, and they're kind of blind to it and can't understand why they keep relapsing on their drugs because they're also relapsing on their porn that nobody ever recognizes. So it's a huge problem. So the more we can do, those 1,300 hours of awareness raising is really, really important.
Well, and podcasts that does not include the podcast. And Sex, Love, and Addiction has had 3 million downloads now. So
Which is unbelievable.
yeah, I know, and I'm grateful that, and it's everywhere. I mean, lots of different countries. And I do know. I mean, I think you told me before that chemsex was coined out of Europe. That the
In
fused.
London.
Yeah. So I'm glad. I'm glad. And I think Seeking Integrity is uniquely qualified because we do look at things holistically. I just came across, and I haven't had a chance to listen to a podcast on treatment programs, and I will be as kind as I possibly can, but how their business model is keep coming back. It's about we need you to relapse. Just keep relapsing. So they're not doing that holistic care. They're not really getting to the underlying issues. It's like, okay, we're going to stop the substances, and it is true even in other programs who, treat or and lots of them say they will. But I mean, I keep getting all of this information. I get a lot of information, but anyway, and everybody gets to pick. So like I know what Seeking Integrity offers. I know, the quality of care. I know it's holistic. We want you, to get what you need so that you are leaving with a foundation of healing and recovery and can move forward and not keep, coming
And
back.
how many times have we seen people that have gone through other programs, right? Including very fine programs, but they only do slices of it. They don't do the whole thing. And that's
Yes.
where I think the expertise of Seeking Integrity is really unique. And so,
Yes.
so important.
Yeah, because you're right. Whatever the behavior that was the most problematic in that moment, and that's what I'm going to go get help for. Like that is just one slice of it. So unless and until, I'm a multi-winner. Like and like I needed to address everything because otherwise, if I'm hanging on to something, Dr. David has talked about smoking and vaping. You're still, keeping that dopamine going. I'm still keeping the dopamine going. It's like non-porn porn or gaming. I mean, like whatever is
Exactly.
happening that will keep that intensity going that lets me continue to escape and numb out. To use 12-step language, I won't be happy, joyous, and free. I want to be happy, joyous, and free, and have the tools to be able to do life on life's terms, which we can learn.
And the research shows this too, but we've seen this integrity. The guys will get, sober, if you will, on sex and porn, but they jump easily, jump to working too much. They jump to food. Those are the two classic ones that people go to. But there's just still trying to find a way to check out a little bit. And so that's where it's so important to just have that awareness that I've got to deal with kind of what's underneath. And I call that whack-a-mole syndrome, right? Today I'm doing porn,
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow it's going to be gambling, then it's
Mm-hmm.
food. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of keep jumping
Mm-hmm.
around and in an effort to soothe myself. And until we deal with the bottom, what's underneath all that, it's just different methods. Uh, yeah, that's
Well,
why I said
and work
earlier, I
is,
think we have to have new methods, right? We have to new
yes.
ways of living, new skills that we didn't have before.
I think we live a very examined life if we're really doing the recovery thing because we have to. But work is one of those. It's tricky because you get, oh, you're doing a great job, and look how, so that one is very seductive from that standpoint. All of them have their own lure, but that one is
Oh
challenging
yeah.
because, I make more money, I get recognition. People, they all think, what a hard worker I am. Like, yeah, it's very challenging. I also, and I've struggled with that one, don't get me wrong, but it's also, what am I missing out on? And I can name, you know, things I should have shown up for if I had prioritized other things instead of work in those moments. I can't go back and undo it, but I sure, work hard on, changing and like remembering my priorities today.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we do have, thank you for a question. We appreciate it. I'm going to look. Oh, can you talk about any harm reduction approaches you have seen for men who used a lot of serial sex affairs, in-person stuff that was illegal with women, but now all of the inner circle stuff is under control? But I keep having attraction to AI-based chat websites that maybe have a thumbnail but not porn on them. It's mostly written erotica back and forth with a bot. I'm trying to get off it, but it keeps creeping up. But I have 5 years away from inner circle. The temptations are still real. Can you talk about the struggle with the whack-a-mole like this? Thank you for that question. Yeah, I hear the struggle, and I'm glad you're here and asking.
Yeah, because that's exactly the kind of awareness we're talking about, where it's so easy to kind of meet those needs, right, if you will, in different ways, more subtle ways than just kind of the crazy addictive behavior. So yeah, and this is a great example of how um, pervasive it is and how easy it is to kind of fall into a trap like that. Not images in this case, right, but more written words. And I think the whole idea of AI, we could talk about a whole lot and how problematic that is and is going to continue to be. But yeah, I think just having an awareness is the first step here. I think I've had a lot of clients kind of push back a little bit saying, well, yeah, looking at an AI generated story isn't as bad as using meth. And so they kind of triage. And yeah, that's true. However, you're still keeping your brain, that pilot light is still on, right? And it's so easy to ignite at any time. And what I found with behaviors like this, where we're still kind of using that to escape a little bit or to get intensity or to numb or whatever it's doing for us. It opens the door, keeps the door open to a bigger relapse because when things get more intense or more stressful, then we kind of we regress back to what it was. So I think I the obvious thing I think would be to start to include some of those behaviors in your inner circle, right? It sounds like you've kind of compartmentalized them into something different than your inner circle. And I think at some point, if they're continuing to keep some of those behaviors alive, or the thoughts, or the cravings, or Tammy mentioned nicotine a little bit, and that's one of my gripes too, is that a lot of times, I think Seek Integrity is the only program I know of, frankly, that asks clients to quit smoking when they come in. And nicotine keeps that, pilot light alive. This kind of stuff, is it lower intensity? Yeah. Is it, not porn? Is very effective at keeping the addiction alive for a while. So I think we have to really be cautious about it. So harm reduction, in fact, you talked about, I think I would, as a way, and with these behaviors, my approach to harm reduction is that kind of harm reduction is useful kind of on the way to abstinence, if you will, for me. Um, so cutting back, right? Not going on as much. Those kind of things are useful. The problem with that, I think, is that we can start to fool ourselves and go into kind of a maintenance mode with that stuff where we still are kind of stuck and we're not really progressing and feeling. Because each one of these things is a perfect way of dissociating. All these addictive behaviors disconnect us from feelings and from, and that oftentimes it's anxiety or worry, but it can also disconnect us from the good stuff, right? We can have wonderful things happen in our lives and we're not feeling that either because we're disconnected from our feelings. And so all these things, even maybe not as harmful as outrageous acting out sexually, but these are more I don't know, B list of stuff, right? The AI generated stuff, or even not porn, although I think it's quite more serious than we think it is. Um, it just keeps the whole addictive stuff alive. So I would really, obviously, you've done some great work with some time. I would wrap these other behaviors into your bottom line behaviors and use the same tools you've done, as opposed to kind of rate them, if you will, on like most serious, maybe a little less serious. I would throw them all into kind of a pretty serious bucket, because otherwise it's just gonna keep you alive, and it puts you at risk for when things get tough. Then it's so easy to just take a step back, and suddenly you're back to square one.
Yeah, and I harm reduction is not harm elimination. There's still harm, and so I do think a lot of people go, well, it's not as bad as, and there's a lot of people that are seeking harm reduction. Dr. David mentioned that we at Seeking Integrity, it is a non-smoke, non-vape, and I was talking to somebody, I can't remember, last fall or something like that, and he chose not to come get help because he would not consider stopping smoking. And I was like, wow, so all of this stuff going on in your life and you're going to hang on to smoking. And I share that because it's like, what are you hanging on to? Like, and I agree, it's that, numbing out and escaping. Um, and I'm also wondering, when you want to engage in this, if you would go journal about what's going on for you. So, like, this is the intention I was talking about earlier. Is like we live a very examined life and we're intentional about paying it, what's going on for me right now? Why do I want to go, interact with a chat bot? And could I make another choice, like call my sponsor, that would be more useful? What could I pick something that's on my outer circle, rather than, engaging in this stuff? All of that stuff still has all the hallmarks of of porn or non-porn, et cetera. It's still isolated. It's a chat bot. It's not a real person. You're not interacting with, you're not you're not creating good things in a relationship. For those in a relationship, I will tell you, betrayed partners really dislike, all of this stuff. Although I did have somebody that thought, well, at least it was, like what, like minimized it as well. But it still is keeping you away from other people and good connections, and doing healthy things for yourself. So I'm suspecting that, when you're looking to do this, it could be aligned with some of the same things that you felt, or that I need to go escape, I need to do whatever, and so you're choosing this because you've given yourself permission, because it's not as bad as, as the other, to do this. But yeah, I'm with Dr. David. It's, like feels like a really slippery slope, for that. So
And yeah, to your point, Timmy, the wording here is creeping up, right? These things creep up at that moment. What is going on? That's where journaling, reflection, processing with somebody, really talking about it with therapists, whoever. But I think just really to look at that, because these are not random, as much as they may seem random. They're ways of dealing with stuff in our lives, and not necessarily a healthy way. So yeah, I'd really take a look at that and figure out, because I obviously, again, you've done some good work. So you have some of that outer circle stuff that you can apply here and work on it. And just the same tools will work here too. It's just pushing it over the goal line, right? If you're all the way,
yeah.
not just kind of halfway.
Yeah. Well, and the temptations are still real. Yes. Welcome to addiction, uh, and they can pop up, they can pop up. So that's why having a really solid relapse prevention plan, paying attention to what's going on, doing the daily evaluations, hourly, if things are stressful, whatever it is that we need to do, the more we're leaning into that, the less, I mean, this is an old story, but one time my husband had an open beer because he was making a recipe with chicken or whatever. You know, I didn't know what was in there. I opened the fridge. First thought after decades is, I could drink that. No one would know. alcohol is just one of my addictions, but and I laughed. I literally laughed, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is, I mean, was it a real temptation? No, but that was my first thought. That was my first brain thought. And then I immediately told him. He, of course, freaked out, thought I was going to go, and I said, no, I just need to be accountable for this. I just need to, I need to tell you. Went to a meeting. I'm fine, but like we have the opportunity to pay attention to those things so that we can go, yeah, sure, no one's going to know, or we can go, I need to live in integrity and I'm going to choose. So I would invite you to look at, rather than harm reduction, choose real recovery, where it's pervasive in all areas of our life and we aren't hanging on to those bits of things, from our past, that can, then drop us over the cliff. So, other questions? We'd love more questions. So with this conference, is that it's in London? So I assume it's not just professionals from um, the UK, but all over Europe that are coming to that as well.
Yeah, actually, our book launch is in London, but the conference itself is in Antwerp, Belgium. Um,
Oh,
uh, yeah, just it's this is the fourth European Chemsex conference. They've had it in
oh,
different
great.
places. This is hosted by the Institute of Tropical Medicine in Antwerp. Yeah, but there will be people from all over Europe, including places you wouldn't think of experiencing chemsex, like Kazakhstan and even
Wow.
Ukraine, believe it or not, in the middle of war zone, people are experiencing this. So it's a
And you know
pretty
what? I would, because what highly stressful situations,
well, true.
and if you're
It
looking
does make
to
perfect sense,
escape,
actually.
yeah, like on some level you go, I this is my, reality sucks, and I can go over here and and escape all of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I I know there is no one that is immune to all of, or no country economic status. There's no one who is immune to this. It can, it's an equal opportunity,
Right.
problem, but so is help. We that's and that's why. So please, when you're there, share, if because they'll be able to speak English in most countries, that we have
Oh,
lots of
yeah.
resources that people can plug into that will supplement their, their healing.
And I
So,
think what's actually gotten their attention now is that Europe has been pretty much, we were speaking of harm reduction a moment ago, that's been their total orientation has been harm reduction. And in that sense, they've probably done a better job for people that need harm reduction than we have. Because we can, I think maybe the first impulse here is everybody gets abstinent right away. I've seen a lot of people get turned off by that, even though they may need that. But there's a process sometimes to get there, to get to that realization. But I think what folks in Europe are realizing is that we've done a pretty good job in this country of the treatment. People that the term is when their uses become problematic, right? They
mhm.
cross that line. And at that point, harm reduction is actually harmful, right? Because you're keeping really dangerous behaviors alive, and they can't be minimized or controlled. They're out of control. So at that point, that's when you start to talk about abstinence. And the Europeans have really traditionally not wanted to look at that, and they are now. So it's a kind of a big turning point right now, which is exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting. And I know I live in, a certain, I hear certain things, people are reaching out and they're in more trouble. So I don't see, harm reduction. I mean, yeah, I go to 12 step and, people have come in, still using something, that are, some substances to, just back in the day, all of the, the meetings were smoking meetings, and it's like they were still hanging on to that. But the challenge I have seen with that is it's hard to stay just reduced,
Exactly.
like it hasn't, I haven't seen it be effective of like stopping the problems, like I still have all of the problems in my life. I may not be using behaviors or substances to the same degree that I was, but I'm still using them to escape, and I'm still not able to, do life on life's terms. And like you said a moment ago, if something happens, I'm likely to go right back to the full on,
Right.
levels. You know,
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Um, And it works, I think, better for substances, maybe if you're harm reduction, meaning, clean needles if you get needles, right? So that just minimizes the chance of getting hepatitis or something.
Right.
But you're still using needles and still
Yeah.
using the drugs to check out. And that's where that may not be the right choice for everybody. Put it that way.
Well, yeah, and people die or put themselves like, if they're, incapacitated to like they are in harm's way, for that. So, okay, great. We have another question. Is there an effective way to convince someone that their addictive behaviors are problematic and encourage them to explore the root issues leading to addictive behavior? This person has not used inner circle acting out behaviors, but purchases cars like daily coffee and becomes addicted to almost everything, it seems. I can so relate to that. I could absolutely too. He refuses to explore these things as problematic and simply becomes violent when confronted. I have created distance and I'm separated from him, but I worry about our child. Oh gosh, I can understand why. Thanks for sharing this question.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a concerning scenario right there. Because since there's somebody who's really kind of fully embedded in their addictive behaviors, and it's a process to have that realization, right? Because these the way our brains kind of rewire as part of the addiction. Um, for example, we've had clients at Seek Integrity who will, be masturbating multiple times a day, and they'll just say, "Well, I'm just a horny guy," and well, no, you're not, right? What's happened is like, okay, at some point, I'm feeling lonely, so what do? I soothe myself, right? Or I'm feeling hungry, or I'm feeling tired, or I'm feeling stressed, and over time, when we go to, in this case, masturbation to deal with that feeling, after a while, our brains are always looking for shortcuts. They jump right over the feeling. We're not even aware that we're lonely. We're just feeling like I need to go masturbate, right? So after a while, we get totally cut off from those issues underneath. We're not even aware of what we're fixing. And so that's where we talked a little bit ago about that window where people are kind of teachable when there's usually some crisis, some moment when they really seriously look at themselves and can be honest, even for a brief moment, say, this is really not working for me. Now, it sounds in this case, it's concerning because, if somebody's so unwilling to look at it and, cars, major purchases since kind of manic. And I think we get the intensity from those behaviors, and there may be some other underlying mood stuff going on too. If when I hear cars like that, that's usually a little bit of mania going on. So yeah, there are some serious issues. Violent is, never ever okay in any relationship. So I think you're right to be concerned about your child, sadly. And I think, this is maybe a case where you need to really have good boundaries and figure out what you need to do so that you can protect yourself and more importantly, almost your child. But I think, yeah, this is a problematic scenario because somebody clearly is right in the middle of it and unwilling to kind of look at it. So the effective way, honestly, are consequences typically. And I think if people are sheltered from some of the consequences, that prolongs the agony, if you will. Um, and in this case, I'm not sure what that would mean specific wise in terms of feeling the consequences, but um, part of that might be a boundary that you set in terms of access to you or your children or whatever. But yeah, Tammy, what do you think about that? That's a scary
It's a
situation.
really tough one because he's already, I mean, you've already set the boundary of like I've separated, and he still isn't getting it. That is, so it is challenging. Um, can you convince someone? No. I wish you could, like I can't convince, but you can create structure and healthy boundaries. And yeah, violence, I'm with Dr. David, is, never acceptable. I also agree. I read an article not too long ago. I think it was around the holidays, but it was about, you know, and this was on a particular subject. So it was, people of affluence have a harder time getting into recovery because they don't have the consequences. And what I hear is, he trades cars and stuff like coffee, but there isn't like a negative financial consequence for him. So and I'm just reading this in the little snippets, but it is harder when there are not, there isn't a consequence where someone goes, oh, I really need to get help, on this particular thing. But for you, creating the healthy boundaries, around you and your child or children, our child. So, that can be, and making sure that it's communicated that, if there is, verbal abuse, physical abuse, you will report it to Child Protective Services or whatever you need to do in your particular area. But holding, or it's supervised visitation, whatever it is, that will help you have the security of knowing that your child is safe, in this. That, yeah, that would be the primary, is the child safety and your safety, of course.
Yeah.
But he does not sound like he's ready to address, because it would be, stop the problematic behaviors. I use the S, and it's a big S. And yeah, it's everything that we're doing and using to escape and to be, like it, it's that, that externalization. That's the word I should use, is the externalization of like those things or that person or that will make me feel better. And it can temporarily, but it doesn't last. And that's why, the cycle of addiction continues and continues. There is a webinar that we did on the cycle of addiction. I'll pull that and put it in the chat. It may be useful for you. And I don't know if he's open to hearing anything, if he's working with a qualified professional, if he's going to 12-step, that would eke in at some point. But if he's just, going like, I stopped those things and I'm going to do this, then it's challenging until there's a big enough negative consequence, that, gets his attention. Then there's a little window open. So,
And sometimes the messenger is important. I think oftentimes
yeah.
people don't want to hear it from their spouse or their therapist, or they kind of tune it out. And I know in my own case, the people I associated with when I was active in my addiction behaved like I did, right? And that was
Hmm.
intentional because I didn't want to
Hmm.
stick out. So I tried to surround myself with people who were actually worse than I was. So I was kind of had this built-in support system, if you will, for my addiction. So I don't know if there's anything that, but he might be more receptive to one of his, guy friends getting honest if there's somebody who would be able to speak the truth to him about that. But just, you have to find the right messenger too. But it's hard. It sounds like he's really committed to this way of being right now. So I agree
Yeah.
with Tammy. It's tricky. But when you add the potential for violence in there, that is a whole different ballgame. That's uh, calls for really firm steps.
Yeah, I did put the cycle of addiction. It's just, we've got a zillion webinars and things in there. And actually, I've got one on. I'll pull it after I read the next question, on real recovery too. So often partners or estranged partners are not the person that they will listen to. If there was willingness to go, yeah, I really want to get back together with you, and this is what I want to do to move forward, then there is. But if it's like what you're saying is, this is, he becomes violent when confronted. I would be more concerned about your safety, in sharing anything. So. Okay, my partner has major childhood trauma, abandoned by biological parents. On top of addiction, he has intimacy, anorexia, and avoidant. We are 16 months past D-Day. Says he does not want, oh, it says he does not want to be part of my healing, just his own. Could this be because of where he is in recovery or a bigger issue? Wow, that's a different question. Thank you for asking it, but I was like, to have someone go, I don't want to be part of your healing is, I like a little bit of me is like, what does it matter? Why? What do you need to do to take care of you with this stated message? So I'm going to go look for that other video, Dr. David. What do you have on that one?
Yeah, well, certainly, describing his history, I mean, that's a setup. A lot of people, of course, in the book of people affected by addictions have some kind of childhood trauma and often abandonment issues, which leads, of course, to intimacy disorders, which is probably, as Dr. Rob says, a universal among sex and porn addicts, is kind of an intimacy dysfunction, if you will, and avoidant at that. Um, yeah, so this is a little bit of an unusual scenario, though, and I'm not sure there's not really enough to know here to answer effectively, why he doesn't want to be part of the healing or what's going on with that. Um, but I agree with Tammy. I think if you look at what you have control over in this situation, it's really taking care of you, and maybe encouraging him to do what he needs to do or do the right thing. Um, but it sounds, yeah, I mean, it's more than just dealing with those issues when somebody's kind of vehemently not wanting to, cooperate. That's a whole other thing. And I think, and also the danger here is that it could be a distraction from the actual healing that needs to take place, is kind of a power struggle of, having him be part of your healing or not. And yeah, I would express your needs and then clearly have a plan B if he can't step up. And it's a sad situation because, help is available. We have great trauma therapies, and these are not situations that cannot be addressed effectively, right? So the help is there if he would want to partake of it. But it doesn't have a good prognosis, right? If he doesn't want to be part of your recovery, um, yeah, I'm not even sure what that says, except um, it just feels like anger and other kinds of stuff, and they're all wrapped up. I just don't know enough of the details involved. But the bottom line, I think, is you have to take care of you in this, and whatever that means in terms of clearly boundaries and getting support for you and your family in the light of that, because obviously you're going to have feelings about that too. You're somewhat past D-Day, right? But not that far past. There's probably still a lot of pain there, and I assume this means there's going to be no disclosure if he's not taking part of that. And that would be really the whole point of a formal disclosure. And I'm wondering if that's the sticking point, but
That's
I
a
don't
good
know.
call. Yeah. 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 Because I just, so I get curious. I'm curious about what his recovery really is. What are you seeing with his actions that are different? Just not acting out is abstinence. It isn't, oh, um,
Oh, okay.
disclosure happened 14 months
Wow.
ago. Oh, wow. Okay. So, all right. Thanks for that. Um, but with recovery, at 16 months, I always say it's 2 to 5 years. I would hope be seeing some changes and shifts and things, just not acting out as abstinence. It's not sobriety, it's not recovery, it's just not doing the things that we weren't supposed to do in the first place. So what is his plan? And because what I in my mind, I'm going like, oh, you guys are living parallel lives. You're gonna, the old saying, with like Al-Anon and codependency and stuff was like, you stay in your lane, I'll stay in my lane. But how does that help the relationship? Um, yeah, avoiding feeling shame. Yeah, well, recovery is about addressing that. So that goes right back to what I'm wondering about is what is he really doing for recovery? Again, recovery is not just not acting out. It would be, hopefully multiple 12-step meetings every week, working with a qualified professional, working on some of this, shame and things. On Fridays, Troy Love has the men's drop-in group, and they talk about, attachment wounds and shame, and that would be a place to start. But there's so many resources. So if it's just I'm gonna hide, that isn't what recovery is continuing to hang on to that shame. Like recovery is, we learn to identify that's a voice of shame that is not who I really am. And in my addiction I did horrible things and I could still do them in my recovery, but I'm going to learn to do things differently. So
And I mean, that is of a piece, right? That avoidant behavior, the shame, not wanting to feel it, the abandonment, all that. Um, so yeah, there are ways ways to address that. And it may be, I'm trying to think of like half steps to get him into the emotional work. Something like a work group where it's more educational, informational, as opposed to like deep feelings, right? That may be something to open the door. Um, but yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah,
Mm,
I'm looking for I put the oh shoot, that one started January 20th. I was going to say because Troy does a work group, healing attachment wounds, developing shame resilience, and it started January 20th. So that one's
perfect.
not. I know, but it started January 20th, so it's already in play. But he'll do it again, but it
Okay.
won't be for a while. But the drop-in group is every Friday, and so yes, I put that out of the doghouse for men who've been caught cheating. That is about working on building trust, and that is I mean, long before Help or Heal came out, Dr. Rob wrote that book, and that one is really helpful for guys. And I wonder, partner, if I want to be connected to you in a real and meaningful way, and this is stuck, and so could we vision, doing something different? One more idea, well, a couple more ideas. Dr. Rob does a one-time 2-hour expert consultation with couples if they're stuck. This is really helpful because
That's a great idea.
yeah, he is very helpful, validating, hopeful, but it also can help nudge, someone out of the stuck, and or it can at least be, if sometimes it's validation for the partner that this guy is, and I'm going to use guy and gal, but is really stuck, and what am I going to do because that person's not willing to budge off of being stuck. It's just more information. So
And
TAMI
then
at
those,
seekingintegrity.com if you want information on that.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
That's
as I
okay.
say, those sessions are long enough that you can really drill down on some of the details that we can't really address here, and then find solutions for them. So it's a great
Yeah.
idea, really great
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, I mean, this is so treatable, like you guys don't have to stay stuck. You're 16 months in. At this point, usually we'd start to see things starting to shift and change. And, but when they're stuck and you had disclosure 14 months ago, then you've been stuck for a long time, on that, in that spot. So getting, some options to move forward separately. It's not the same as Dr. Rob. I still recommend Dr. Rob, but we do have, couple support sessions, Jason and I both do couples support sessions, and we work really hard at giving resources that will be meaningful and listen. Those are 15 minutes versus Dr. Rob's are 2 hours, and Dr. Rob is the expert. So, but they're a completely different price point too. So, but I'm glad you're reaching out, like, and regardless of what he does or doesn't do, like, please don't get stuck for you. So I wanted to thank you. I'm the separated partner with a violence child concerns. I do have a protection order and I feel my boundaries are firm, though I see consistent drain of financial resources that could support our child and his family do not speak my language and enables his behaviors by bailing him out financially. Yes, this is agree that consequences are
Mm.
necessary, but he escaped legal consequences, will likely escape financial consequences, or family will bail him out, etc. Family courts don't care. And you're right. We did a series, should I say or should I go? And the last one was on the legal situation. And you're right. The courts don't care. They are not good at, handling any of those. It's very, they're just drilling down to certain things. So, um, but exactly what you were saying is the article I was reading. It was, and it was really sad because, they, this can be high risk behavior, and what a waste of a life, because he's not choosing to be, on a path of integrity and, and connected with you and your child, So I'm sorry, but I'm really glad you have, and I am not a legal person, of course, but I would hope that with um, your legal counsel, you could perhaps have, I need a financial accounting. It doesn't have to be, well, he's drained all the financial resources, and so now we have nothing. It can be, well, you did when we separated. So I don't know. Get get real help that knows what they're talking about with that stuff.
And I just really want to commend you too, because this is a really difficult situation, and you're very clear-eyed about it, and we're looking at the factors here. So that's hard to do and maintain and care for your child and care for yourself. And so, yeah, good job. It's a really difficult situation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's enough if you're dealing with the pain of betrayal. Like that's enough, that's more than enough. And so when there's all these other layers,
Yeah,
yeah, and yes, but it's also, you're talking about the family situation, that stuff doesn't happen, in a bubble. Like there are factors and it's hard, it can be hard to pull that apart and have someone choose to get the help that they need, when there's those other factors and lifelines from family of like, oh, here's money, here's whatever, we'll
exactly.
take care of the problem. They sure wouldn't want to look at him in a negative light or anything that they've done or are doing as being part of the problem. So
Exactly. Yeah.
okay, well, thank you so much. Great questions. Thanks for being here and asking them. And you can always reach out if we can be of help. And there's lots of resources on seeking integrity. And I will be anxious to hear more after you do your conference in Europe. I will wish you luck on
Yeah, me
that.
too.
And
Thank you.
I'll see you in April. So we'll see you then.
Wow.
All right.
Okay,
I know.
perfect.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.
Thanks, Tammy.